All right, our objective, we move on to plants. Our objective tonight, I'd like by the end for each of us to be able to identify at least 2 of our local native treasures. And I mean identify them specifically, not say, oh, I think that's an oak tree. But to say, oh, that's a blue oak. Oh, that's a live oak. Oh, that's buckbrush. And to make a personal plan for some do's and don'ts that you take away from tonight's meeting. Just maybe an area of your yard that you weren't sure what to do with it that has some of those natives in it. So keep that in mind as we go. And get ready, because there's a lot of info about to be thrown your way. Oh, okay. Here we go. The inspiration, encouragement, and hope part of our meeting is one of my faves. I'm trying to, okay. Okay, here we go. Salvia Creek Garden. It's just doing so well. You can see it as you drive by. There's a coyote brush blooming. Our Brandagie sage is already blooming. And Patty put in her first creek plant. That's a common reed. It's a Juncus patens. Yay, I put a music symbol because it was like singing. Some more shots of the garden, plants that are doing so well. Oh, those are new guys. I have no mouse, so I can't point to things, but that's a new little sage on the right and 2 new penstemons, desert beard tongues on the left. Penstemon pseudospectabilis and Salvia celestial blue. The other exciting thing, and Darcy, forgive me for putting our working thing in here, but the YLP welcome guide, which was out, the last version, the version on the left is from 2018, but we've been invited to have a presence in the one that's going to be created this year. And so on the right is just our working pages. Darcy, Jeannie and I had a brainstorming session. I wrote something up, Darcy's working on it. And I think it's exciting because that means that each new homeowner every year, and apparently there's like almost 150 of them each year, is going to get this and be introduced to the idea of thinking about their native plants on their properties before they clear their properties. Before they do things that they end up regretting. So it's kind of exciting. Okay, here we go. The topic of tonight. We have these native treasures in our yards. What do we do? What do we not do? Okay, can you guys see the whole slide? You can read the writing on the top?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, yeah. Okay, good. Okay, so I can't read it anymore. So our unique situation in YLP is that we live in a place where we're exposed to these plants every day on our properties that most people have to hike or travel to see. And in this picture, starting at the left, I don't know how many of you are already able to ID them, but we have blue oak. In the sky to the right of that, we see a gray pine sticking up. The tallest ones are the gray pines. And then all the way on the right is a live oak. Okay, these are the plants we'll focus on tonight, guys. We're going to focus on 6 of our native trees and shrubs. Gray pine, interior live oak, blue oak, 2 of the California lilacs that we have in YLP. And YLP means Yosemite Lakes Park. So in YLP, we have buckrush and we have whitethorn, or chaparral whitethorn, 2 different types of California lilac. And we have only one native manzanita here. It's called whiteleaf manzanita. And why did I choose those plants? Well, they're our most common native trees and shrubs here. There's a number more. There are a bunch more that will follow the same principles that we'll learn for these. So our native, I can't see what's at the top. Can someone read it to me, please?
Our native treasures mission.
Go ahead.
Oh, our native treasures mission. I love that. Oh, I guess I wrote it. Okay. In order to treat these native trees and shrubs as invaluable, right? We will learn to call them by name. That is one of the first ways of learning about plants, is to actually learn what they're called, whether it's the common name or the scientific name. We will understand that we're to do as little as possible to them, winter, summer, spring, and fall. And we'll explain why. And that's doing as little as possible to the plant itself and around the plant. And furthermore, we will begin to envision, if we haven't already, how we can actually build our landscape plans around those trees and shrubs, using them as mature focal points in our garden. Okay, before we get started, just to remind those of you who are new to California native plant gardening, our plants do not want to be hot and wet, ever. When the weather is hot, we do not expose them to water. Manzanitas, pines, and oaks, do not water them in the hot weather. Do not plant plants under them that will require water in the hot weather, except under certain very unusual circumstances that we'll describe. Okay, you risk the life of your established native if you don't follow that principle. Okay, oh, here we go again. Okay, first category, underneath it all. All right, this is called the root protection zone. Just very quickly, on the left is similar to an oak tree, where the leaves end is called the canopy drip line. Underneath, and if that canopy gets wet, it drips underneath it. You want to add about 3 feet beyond that and draw a diameter all the way around that, and that is your root protection zone. What that means is the things we're about to talk about cannot happen inside that zone if you want to preserve the well-being of that tree or shrub. Now, for our gray pines, we want to protect, I mean, I don't know how we can do this, but we want to protect as much as we can around that gray pine and not expose it, especially to extra water in the hot weather. Okay? It's called the root protection zone, and it's further even than the canopy radius, the drip line. Okay. Don't disturb the roots. This can be a whole college course, but I'm just briefly going to let you guys know, as some of you do and some of you don't, that underneath our native trees and shrubs, they have roots. They have some tap roots that go down deep, and they have a lot of shallower roots that go out into that root protection zone. But they also, if they are healthy and in a thriving community of plants, those roots are connected by a network of fungi. Those types of fungi are called mycorrhizae. You don't have to worry about that technical name. What's important is that you understand that that plant connects with other plants around it using that network. So if you have an area in your yard, out in a remote area that hasn't been disturbed too much, and you have an oak tree, and you have a pine, and you have some buckbrush and another oak tree, there is a good chance that underground they are sharing information with each other in the form of, if one of them is stressed, they actually give more resources to the other plant. They share moisture, they share nutrients. This network is critical to the well-being of our native treasures. So if you look at the diagram, you see that he's showing a plant on a slope, and he's saying that there are the brown area He says strong ectomycorrhiza. That is the fungi that are attached to those roots, and you can see them. So if you start digging in that area, or you trench, or you pave, you are actually damaging the overall life structure of that tree. Now, therefore, I'm sorry to say there's some negatives here. There's do's and don'ts, and there's a bunch of don'ts. Your oaks and pines and buckbrush, your native trees and shrubs do not disturb the root zone as little as possible. Do not irrigate. Don't water under there unless you have put in plants that like dry shade and that are California natives and that you will barely have to water in the hot weather. Do not fertilize the soil. Do not amend the soil. No pesticides. Pesticide companies will tell us, oh, don't worry, we'll kill everything on the top, but nothing goes in the soil. I won't tell you what I think of that. Don't use pesticides. And don't plant things underneath that need to be watered in the summertime. Now, I understand there are some of you out there that say, but I know of this pesticide that 90% of it is gone by the time it would hit the root zone. I understand, but from my point of view, I have to tell you what I know works. And anything you do other than that is a risk you take. Now, many of us moved into homes where there was already paving around our oak trees. Bob and Karen, I'm talking to you. They have Bob and Karen Shirey have a beautiful patio in a house they recently bought. And there is a beautiful oak tree that seems to be thriving, that's completely paved over with just a little hole around it for the trunk. That tree is doing great now. It will have a foreshortened life, but probably not in Karen and Bob's lifetime. But please don't do that around your oaks. When people come in to put in electricity or water or irrigation, please encourage them not to trench within the root protection zone of your plants. Even when you dig to plant things, be conscious that you are disturbing that fungal and root network, and dig a hole only as large as the plant you're going to put in. Compacting, meaning driving a piece of equipment underneath the root zones of these trees. If you have a tractor, please try not to drive underneath your oaks. That compaction is terrible trouble for that oak tree. And finally, don't add dirt. Don't think, oh, well, you know, it kind of looks like it'd be nice if there was sort of some land built up around this oak tree. You're basically covering the ability for that oak's roots to exchange air and nutrients to exchange water and nutrients with the air, to get some air, to breathe, so to speak. So sorry for the don'ts. They're super critical. Do. If you want to plant and garden under your oaks, do it. I'll show you some pictures later on. But install compatible California native plants, certain grasses, hummingbird sage, some currants, some things we can help you find. Also mulch around these oaks. You'll see it, these oaks and pines and deer brush, buckbrush. Mulch with quality organic material. Please resist purchasing mulches that have additives like dyes in them. You want just plain cedar, redwood. The highest recommendation we can give here is to shredded redwood, which is gorilla hair mulch, but compact it to decrease its flammability. You compact it. Leave your leaves under your oaks. Oh my goodness. That's how an oak gives itself nutrition. It sheds its leaves. Those leaves decompose and feed that tree. And weed by hand where possible. This is tricky. In about 3 months, we're going to have so many weeds under our trees. Choose one, you guys. Choose one big oak and see if you can weed by hand and mulch a small area each year. And you'll see what can happen if you do that for a few years. Okay. Do you have the blue slide now?
Yes.
You have a blue slide? Good. Okay, it's a balancing act, guys, right? There's not a perfect world to be in. We balance the health of the plant with our sense of what's beautiful, with preserving habitat that's vanishing before our very eyes, and with fire safety. We have to balance these things, and it's tricky, and there's no perfect way to do it. Okay, here we go. I have a whole lot of slides. We can't talk about our plants until we know what they're called and we can call them by name. So here we go. The only pines native to Yosemite Lakes Park are gray pines. I repeat, the only pine native to this area is gray pine, or Pinus sabiniana. Here are 3 from my yard that are thriving. Huge, every other year or so, and I'm sorry, I don't know, maybe Reagan could help with this, but they put out this huge cone. That's why some people call them widow makers. And if you're not sure if a plant in your yard is a gray pine, one way to tell is the needles are in sets of 3. You can see to the right. That's a dried needle, a dried group of needles. They group in 3s. Also, these gray pines, as they mature and as they get under a lot of stress, as they have during drought and because of bark beetles around here, you'll see a lot of your pines, like on the left, they'll begin to get branches that begin to die and hit the ground. Those, if they are within 100 feet, well, if they're within 30 feet of your house, they are a fire hazard. Those are ladder fuels. Those need to be removed. They don't need to be removed if they're 200 feet from your house. And you'll see CAL FIRE doesn't even recommend that. But close to your house, have them professionally removed or remove them yourselves. But if you do it, please look to the right and see that clean cut that was made. This was done by an arborist whom I trusted and did this to one of my gray pines. And in the middle is that very gray pine that he trimmed up. And I'm going to need to go and get some of those low-hanging dead branches, not the lateral branches, but just the little guys hanging low. More gray pines, see it on the right? These are all shots from YLP. I believe that the one on the right, this gray pine on the right on my property, I believe that it probably rotted and died because it was so close to this stream. And it really does not want a lot of water. So I don't know that for sure. I'm just conjecturing. Here's 2 young ones that were so stressed during the drought that they're barely alive, but I'm leaving them up because of the habitat they continue to provide. I have them trimmed more than 10 feet up, and they still provide valuable habitat. It's about 70 feet from my house. I'm not concerned about a fire hazard. More gray pines in the middle. And finally, save the babies. If you see this little guy on your property and it's in a hot area, a nice exposed hot area, cage him and protect him, and maybe he will grow up. They do not procreate very easily at all. That's why we're losing a lot of them. We lost so many in the drought, and there's so few new ones coming up. Okay, moving on from gray pine, any questions?
I would just have a comment
Yes.
that some of the needle die-off is from air pollution. You'll see that they can't hold on to the needles any more than about 3 years. And you can tell where the new growth starts and stops if you look carefully at the ends of the branches. So you can actually go back and look at last year's growth and the year before that. And then you can see when you get to about the 3rd year, they're just not able to hold on to those needles because they've been damaged by our air pollution.
And probably that will be exacerbated due to the several months of intensely smoky air we had this year.
Yeah, quite possibly. Yeah.
Thank
And
you.
then the other thing we've lost them to is PG&E's clearing around power lines. We've lost some of our great big healthy trees that were important habitat trees. And that's been a real tragedy, unfortunately.
It's been a tremendous tragedy in our community. There's been a really political move to get rid of them without a botanical look at what actually needed to go.
Yeah,
I
that's
agree.
what I saw on my street. So
that's you, Janine, talking?
yeah.
Yeah,
right.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, here we go. Next one of my favorite subjects, our blue oaks, Quercus douglasii. Now, this is a picture from now. So the leaves have not fallen off of this blue oak yet. They will, but they are in their fall color. So the 2 trees in the middle with the kind of upright trunks and that very dramatic architecture are blue oaks. Now, Preston, you might help me with this, or Janine, or someone else. I do not know that we have other deciduous, I don't know if we have valley oak here. I don't think we do. We're too low for black oak. So someone pipe in if you know that Yosemite Lakes Park has other deciduous oaks. Okay, we'll stick with blue oak for now because it is this main plant community, you guys, is blue oak, gray pine. That is the main community. It's oak pine woodland. Okay.
Leslie, this is Reagan. I also used to live in YLP, and I can't think of a location where there is valley oak. The only place that I would think really to look for them is where there is perennial water.
Mm-hmm.
And
the only place there's
lakes are man-made, so I don't know if they would have established there.
I'm with you. I'm with you, Reagan. I didn't know you used to work here. Live here. That's very cool.
Yeah, before we bought our current house.
So here is, I'm sorry that my pixels are a little messed up here. That's a picture of the bark, which is rather rough. It is not a smooth bark. And this is the leaf and the acorn. There is some natural variation in the leaves. I'm sorry. Some of these pictures were from CalFlora, so they might not be credited, but they were from the Berkeley Library of California Native Plant CalPhotos. I liked this because it's blue oak with the gray pine to the right. And it's probably a live oak to the right as well. I put this in because a lot of our oaks are not healthy. And when they're not particularly healthy, they look a lot like this. This doesn't look like it's very old. It looks like probably, it could be in a lawn, it looks like. It is not particularly happy, but a lot of ours look like this. Blue oaks do get some mistletoe. That's a whole other class for us to have. All I would ask of you is please to not look at mistletoe as the enemy of an oak. It is part of the ecology of an oak. There are situations in which huge amounts of mistletoe can be a problem on an oak, but usually it's the stress of the oak that invites the mistletoe and not the other way around. In other words, deprive your oak of its leaves, cover it with paving, compact the soil. There's a good chance you're going to see a lot of mistletoe on that oak. And you're going to think, oh, the mistletoe's killing the oak. When in fact, the other factors are killing the oak and the mistletoe is coming into a vulnerable recipient. But we can have a whole other class on that. Just please don't hire someone to come in and remove all your mistletoe without considering where the mistletoe is on the spectrum, the continuum of dangerous or not dangerous to your oak. It's vital habitat for bluebirds, among other wildlife. Oops, we don't want to look at that. But that's a big old Douglas oak. Blue oak, Quercus douglasii. Another one that looks like a lot of ours here, with these exotic grasses under it. There it is in wintertime. I think you see the heavily ridged bark and the single trunk. That is how you will distinguish a lot of them, like in the springtime when everybody's got lots of leaves. Your blue oaks will be the ones that have a single trunk in general and that have that ridged bark. You'll see with the live oak that they look quite different. Please save the babies. There are very few blue oak babies. And usually they get weed whacked down around our properties. As you mosey in your garden, if you see something that has that blue-green leaf like that, cage it and see. They're very hard to propagate, and it's very unlikely that they will get large in your lifetime, but your grandchildren might enjoy them. Okay, next, interior live oak. Quercus, can someone pronounce this for me, please? Wislitzii? Reagan, you got that one for me?
I say Wislitzii, but part of the thing is everyone says things differently.
Yes, they do. Okay, thank you. Okay, so here's a huge one in my backyard, guys. When I moved in, it was completely native exotic grasses underneath it, and it was watered every day for 20 minutes. I stopped watering it, and over 7 years, I have finally mulched completely around it and beyond the leaves, and I cannot tell you how it's thriving. Different angle of the same tree. So do you notice how this is not a single trunk? These are multi-trunk live oaks, the interior live oak, which is what we have here. There is a lot of variation in the leaves. Sometimes the leaves will be heavily toothed, like the ones on the bottom. Sometimes they'll look almost smooth. Sometimes on the same tree, you'll see different types of leaves. These are the ones that go into bloom and give us allergies. This is one in bloom on the left. Ooh, sorry, not a good pixels. Okay, can you pick out the live oak in the picture? So we have on the far right, try to figure this out on your own, I can't point. But on the far right, we have one type of oak. To its left, we have another type of oak. In the front of the picture, we have a kind of California lilac. Behind that, a gray pine. And behind that, another blue oak in one shot, because we're lucky that way. The live oak is all the way on the left. Gray pine on the right. Please save the babies. There are a lot of live oak babies here and they grow fast. The one in the middle is on my property and it's like a year old and the deer are eating it because I haven't caged it yet. But they will grow fast if you cage them and don't water them. Okay, moving on. Oh, I'm sorry. Other comments about interior live oak or blue oak? Okay.
Yeah, I would just note, you're so right about how rapidly the live oaks grow in comparison to the blue oaks, because I have some that germinated after the road was put in, I suppose, that were about 3 feet tall when I moved here, and now they're about 7 feet tall 20 years later. So they grow really, really slowly. And probably the oldest one on the property is somewhere over 300 years old, from what I can gather. So the blue oaks are very drought resistant, although I did lose some in the drought. And they just grow super slow. So quite different from live oaks in that respect.
And really wonderful to realize when we see these majestic ones that they were here before white people were.
Absolutely. Yeah. Some of our,
I mean, the very
those
trees.
Yeah. So this is what an old growth, foothill ecosystem looks like. These blue oaks that are probably in the 300 to 450 year range, some of them.
Yep. Amazing. Thank you. Okay, so moving on to our only native manzanita in Yosemite Lakes Park. And that is this dude right here. He's my neighbor. He's on my neighbor's rock formation. Arctostaphylos viscida is how I pronounce it. It means white leaf manzanita. And again, it's the only one that's native to Yosemite Lakes Park. You will not, under most circumstances, be able to find them at any native plant nurseries. Intermountain Nursery, though, does sell a hybrid. They've hybridized our local manzanita with a very garden-tolerant manzanita called Arctostaphylos densiflora. And they've made one called Little Sandy because it's from the Little Sandy Creek area up by Intermountain. That's as close as you can get to being able to plant one, right? But you have them naturally. So if you have any babies, protect them. Oh, I'm so sorry, wrong direction. There's a detail of the leaves and the beautiful red bark. And that looks like a live oak on the right, intermingling. Excuse me, a gray pine. Sorry about the fidelity of the picture, but that bark does peel at certain times, which I know you guys have probably noticed. All right, this is a trigger warning. Manzanita trigger warning. This is what not to do with your manzanitas. This was a new resident, and I do not blame the person because the person didn't know any better. But manzanita do tend to what they call burn hot. It just means they burn hot. It doesn't mean they start fires, perpetuate fires, leap onto roofs to create fires. Do not cut them down. I beg you, do not cut them down. Even when they are dead, unless they are next to your house or within 30 feet of your house. That is valuable habitat. It is beautiful architecture and beautiful wood. Please don't let this happen at your neighbors' houses if they're thinking about it. Here's a bunch of them germinating together in some really pretty area, not YLP, some wild area. And a grove of them. Okay, manzanita, questions or thoughts? Okay, one of my personal favorites. This is called chaparral whitethorn, or Ceanothus leucodermis. It's a California lilac, and it has a beautiful white bark. Now, I know that many of us on our properties see a lot of these and just see red because we think they're just going to start burning. And so we cut them down completely to the ground. And it's just not necessary. And we'll talk about that in a second. This is a wonderful, wonderful wildlife plant, and it's an essential part of this native ecology. People all over California buy all hybrids and different types of these California lilacs, and they would pay thousands and thousands of dollars to have mature ones on their properties. Please value them. Please get to know them and call them by name. I had to show a springtime shot. This is just a native chaparral whitethorn in my yard. Many of us have them, and this is what they do in the spring. They're sweet smelling, and they create tiny little berries that are wonderful for wildlife. So you can see why it's called whitethorn. The bark is white, and after the leaves fall off of many of the little branchlets, they get really sharp like thorns. They're not actually thorns, but if you've ever tried to prune one with an old branch, you know they're super sticky. And that's why they're called chaparral whitethorn, or leucodermis, which means white bark or white skin. And I put on the right, compare buckbrush. That's the other kind of California lilac we have in YLP. But it looks different, and we'll get to that. Here it is in bloom. I couldn't help it. When we bought our house in 2013, well, we rented first. These were in full bloom in the very front of the property. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. These are just sitting on this property. Again, take note of the white new growth. The new growth is this beautiful white. Now you will often see, one second, here it is, it's on the left. Do you see it there? It's the low guy on the left. Now, if that's close to your property, trim the ones that are about to hit the ground, but trim them from the very bottom. If they're dead and they're looking like they're ladder fuel, do that, and then they get this beautiful fountain form. Here's one just growing in a cut across the street from me where they just literally cut down some things and cut the ground. And this one's just coming out. Here's another one. Here's a young one. As you drive by my property, you can see I have a couple that the deer have eaten and eaten and eaten, but they're coming up anyway. There they are on the right, a little grove of them. And you can see I've mulched under them. I put mulch and a border all the way around them and trimmed them up, and they're wonderful. Now, I wanted to just show you, on the left, you can see that some of these branches are dying. Many of us have these on our properties. We can see that there are parts of of these plants that are dying. Again, you can, and within close to your house, should get rid of the dead, but get rid of it all the way at the bottom. Mine was not, you can see on the right, this is one of mine. It was not cut so great. It should go all the way down to the bottom. Some of them I left stubs I shouldn't have, but I did the best I could with what I had at the time. The ones that are completely brown need to go, but look at the white ones. The new white growth is healthy. Save the babies. So check this out. On the left, last year, I bought a 5-gallon, really expensive California lilac called a Ray Hartman, which is just one of the more popular ones in the trade. We babied it. I gave it perfect conditions. We caged it on top. We caged it on the bottom. I watered it only exactly when I was supposed to and didn't when I wasn't. And here's what happened. It completely died. See the dead one? And in front of it is a Ceanothus leucodermis that's growing in and is perfectly happy. So what's the message in that? Treasure our natives that belong here. So I'm going to keep it caged, let it get mature. On the right, another baby that I haven't caged yet, and the deer are eating it to within an inch of its life. Okay, this is buckbrush. I'll bet you a lot of you have either heard and or used the term buckbrush. I think there's probably a good chance you've used it on not just this plant, but on the last plant, the leucodermis, the whitethorn. Everything kind of falls into the bucket of buckbrush. Well, Ceanothus cuneatus is a very important part of our ecology here. It is a California lilac. These are its blooms in the springtime. On the right, actually I can't see it well enough. I think that that is where the blooms have fallen off and it's making the berries, but I'm not sure. It has these very stiff branches. It kind of looks a little Dr. Seuss-y, you know, just a lot of poking around up and down and sideways and backwards and stuff. That's a great example of buckbrush. There's one in bloom. If you trim it up like that, it takes on that lovely fountain form, which makes it more fire safe. Okay, comments on California lilacs. Comments or questions? Okay. This is coming out in the welcome guide, but I encourage you guys to go around your property and inventory these 6 things and just see if you can sort of count some and say their names. White, blue oak, you know, at least say manzanita. Say the scientific name if you feel like going for it. Okay, here we go. I'm going to move quickly because I don't want to go over and we got a late start. So here's the deal. If you have to prune, first make sure that you're very mindful about it. There are 3 reasons to prune. One is the health of the plant. So if there's a lot of dead in it, sometimes it's best to get that out, not always. Aesthetic preference. Maybe there's just a certain thing going on and you want it to look a little bit different. I just encourage you to do that mindfully, that you do not want to prune much at once, or you do not want to change the overall shape of the plant. And finally, fire safety, which is hugely important up here. Now let's talk about fire for a second. And again, I'm not going into any detail, but I do want to let you guys know, let's look at the top, please. I'm going to read it as it's written. This is from University of California Cooperative Extension. It was published in 2009. Some fire recommendations have changed since then. This has not. Do not remove vegetation down to bare soil. Please encourage anyone you talk to. If you have neighbors who look like they live in a dirt lot, it's because they do. But it was their choice because they didn't know and they were trying to be safe. But you don't need to do that. Do not remove vegetation down to bare soil and do not destabilize your hillsides by using heavy equipment on them. Soil erosion and mudslides can result. Okay. Now, if you look on the bottom, look on the right where it says well maintained. Do you notice that there's a lot of plants in that property? No one is telling you to remove all the plants from within 30 feet of your house. You should remove them within 10 feet of your house And between the next 20 or 30 feet, keep them hydrated to the best of your ability without damaging the plant. Keep them maintained and plant consciously so that you're not planting, you know, sages that will get 8 feet tall and woody. But beyond those 30 feet, that's wildland. Okay, super important, timing. Here's when to prune. The good news is you don't have to prune anything really until the hot weather. If you need to prune some blue oak for some reason, but please be mindful that they really don't need it, do it now or after they lose their leaves. They enter a period of dormancy, and that's the best time for the blue oaks. True of gray pines too. There are some reasons that I won't get into that are a little bit different for the gray pine, but as a rule, your deciduous oak and your gray pine, you can do in the wintertime. You can prune them in the wintertime. The others, you need to wait until it's hot and dry. With manzanita especially, if you wait until, even if it's still warm, but it's raining some, even if water splashes up onto the wounds that you've created when you've pruned your manzanita, it can introduce pathogens or disease into the plant. So to be safe, your live oak, all your California lilacs, and your manzanita, if they must be pruned, please do it after June 15th and before October 15th, something like that, just when it's hot and dry. I don't mean that if it's 70 one day, you shouldn't do it. What I mean is when the season is hot and dry. Okay, I really want you guys to take this in because this is super important. And people are always asking me this, and people have all kinds of different information. I sourced this extremely carefully, and I can share those sources with you if you like. Questions or comments about this? Okay, now we're done with IDing. Now, how do we feature some of these native treasures in our designs? Okay, so sorry, but a lot of this is my own yard because it's how I show you what I've learned. And enough of you haven't shared your own pictures with me that I can share yours. But anyway, so as you can see, this is a live oak, an interior live oak. It took us years, but what we have done now is we have bordered the root protection zone with actually limbs that were pruned off of other pines in our yards and in a neighbor in Mariposa who had ponderosa. And we bordered it using that. And this is completely mulched with the chips that came from the gray pine that were removed from Yosemite Lakes Park and the leaves of the live oak. And underneath them, I have plants that are appropriate for dry shade that would grow naturally under an oak in this area, more or less. This is a chaparral whitethorn, your California lilac with the white bark. And I went around the root zone of this and I mulched and I planted Brandigee sage, which have gotten even bigger than this. And I'm going to be cutting much lower in a couple of months. But just taking one of your shrubs like this, your California lilacs, border it, mulch it, plant appropriately under it, and it becomes a feature. Instead of like, oh, what's that scrubby ass looking thing? Look over there. Sorry for my profanity. What's that scrubby thing over there? Which is, I think, how a lot of us feel, right? We have grasses growing up, old dead grass coming through it. We can barely even see where the roots are. but with a little TLC and attention, it can become a beautiful feature. This is our member Tina. Tina Morton has a fenced-in area behind her property with an old live oak that looks like it's been through a war. I think that probably her house was graded and they put all the rocks and dirt over there and they buried the bottom part of the trunk. Nonetheless, it has persisted. And so you can see on the right, she mulched under that whole area with gorilla hair mulch. And last winter we planted these hoikara, which are these native flowering plants that grow naturally under oaks, require very, very little water in the summer. And so she has this beautiful oak woodland area that she created around this oak. This is our member Kathy Coons. Last spring, she too had this, that is I believe it's is it a little live oak? Is that what it is? I think it is. I think it's a little live oak. And she de-graveled it and mulched it and planted appropriate plants around it. She planted a couple of sages and a couple of deer grass and put some sculpture and rocks. And now she has this lovely island that features her native shrub. This is William Miller and Nancy Miller's, the top of their driveway. And you guys, I know it looks better than this now. This was after they first planted it, but I wanted to highlight how they used their manzanita as the backdrop for this lower planting of shrubs, of sage and deer grass. And of course, their adorable native plants live here sign. And you know, when you prune things, sometimes you can put them back in the garden. Like on the right, there was nothing vertical there. And so we just found this and just buried it. Sometimes there'll be 3 birds at a time on it. But I'm considering putting a little dish in the middle and putting some peanuts in it, or daily or whatever, for the scrub jays. But you can have elements like this in your garden. And you can see on the left, a year ago, this was just the flat part of my property with weeds and just weeds and a mess. And we weeded and we put 3 inches of the gray pine chips in it, and we bordered it with pruned pine branches, and now it's garden. I planted a series of coyote brush in there to continue my hedgerow for wildlife. And of course, your oaks are magnificent for this. Live oak on the left, live oak on the right. This is a dead manzanita on my property that I've left and just hung a little wind chime from it. Just a little bit of attention and your native treasures can really shine. Okay, in summary, this is the same slide as before, but I'm going to read it. In order to treat these native trees and shrubs as invaluable, irreplaceable members of your home with their own needs, independent of your needs, we will know them, call them by name. We will do as little as possible on and under them, and we will use in our landscape plans and designs. All right, before we get to the reflection part of our journey, are there comments or questions? Okay, oops, wrong direction. Okay, if you have something to write with, that's great. If you don't, that's okay. But there is a lot of research showing that when you take in new information, if you write some of it down at the end, especially if you're processing it, it sticks a lot better. So what I'm going to do now for about 2 minutes is I'm going to identify at least 2 of the native treasures on my property. And I'm going to make a personal plan for do's and don'ts for their winter care. So I'm going to choose 2 that I haven't done it yet. So why don't you write down 3 steps you'll take to care for your native treasures this winter? Do's or don'ts. 3 steps, things you will do or you won't do to some of your native trees and shrubs this winter. And I am going to ask for a little bit of sharing afterward. No cold calls though. Okay. Anybody like to share? Just go for it. Please.
I will. I'm Paula. I have, I believe, I have several Ceanothus, but I don't know which kinds they are. So I'm going to, and they're growing naturally, natively, and I'm going to figure that out and then mulch underneath and, treat them carefully and do some gentle pruning. And then turns out this beautiful oak we have is in fact a blue oak, deciduous, and it gets the worst grasses, non-native grasses underneath, and so I'm going to start pulling out those grasses by hand and mulch.
Okay, excellent. Be conscious as we read, this was a big issue for me at my last house and I struggled with it. Under our oaks, when there are all those grasses, you think, well, but I'm disturbing the soil. I'm disturbing the mycorrhizal network when I pull things out. And that's the truth. So what I would suggest is if they're tender and really shallow rooted, I would pull those grasses. Those that are a bit more stubborn, I would weed whack them down and mulch right on top of that. Well, and rake that, weed whack it down, rake it, and then mulch.
Excellent. Okay, thank you.
That's a great plan, Paula. And don't forget, you won't be pruning your Ceanothus until the hot weather.
Okay, that's good. Good to be reminded. Thank you.
Thanks, Paula.
Yep. Leslie, and the raking is to get some of that seed bank out, correct?
Oh, yes. That's one of the reasons. The raking is in part because sometimes after we weed whack, the grass that's come down is so thick that it forms this thatch that becomes an impermeable barrier under the oaks. Do you have a comment about that?
No, that sounds right. Those Mediterranean grasses, it's just, the seed bank is so hard. I just am very hung up on the seeds because they drive me crazy.
I know, it's very, very difficult. I mean, best to get rid of them before they go to seed, but the seed is still in the soil. We just struggle and we do it year after year. Yeah, Jeannie.
Yep.
What I've had to do, just to quickly make a note on this last subject, over the last 8-9 years that I've lived here, when I pull the weeds, I bag them all. And I've had as many as 35 massive garden bags over the years in 1 year, because I don't want to lay that, thatch and seed back down on the ground and have it reseed. So I'm much better now after doing that for like 9 years. I have not nearly the weeds I used to have, but it took me weeding and bagging and taking them to dumpsters to get rid of them. Leslie, I have some of the oaks there in the front yard, and the people who lived here before planted a bunch of like marguerite bushes. So, and they're all on a they're partially on a sprinkler. Now I'm letting them die, but cutting them out, I know I'm going to disturb a ton of the soil. So what's the best way to go about cutting out or taking out all of those bushes?
What I would do is I would cut them to the ground, but not pull out the roots.
Okay, just cut them down.
That's what I would do.
All right.
I don't know
Thank
if
you.
anybody disagrees with me, but that's what I would do. And you may find that you get a little bit of green coming back in that you can just trim away. But that's what I would do,
Yeah.
Jeannie.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
I just have a comment on trying to get rid of your non-native weeds. When I weed whack, I've been, especially in particular areas around the house, I've been trying to whack before the grass sets seed, when it's still, you can press your thumb into the seeds, and if they're still milky, they're not viable. So if you weed whack at that point, you'll interrupt the seed set for that year, for that generation. And it's maybe a little less backbreaking, and you're still getting the benefit of that organic matter going back into your soil. So that would just be my suggestion for trying to control our non-native grasses. They're unfortunately very well adapted to our climate and very
Indeed they are.
persistent.
Yes. And of course, we like to leave wild flowers. So, that is
Yeah.
often a negotiation between couples. If two people live at a house, often one person wants to leave the flowers and the other person wants to get the whacking done. So that is actually a negotiation that can be performed. And you can identify certain areas as islands of wildflowers. I certainly do that with my whacker. And I put flags. I just put landscape flags, and I said, don't cut him down here and don't cut him down here. And I'm always driving him crazy, but he's awesome. And so we'll have islands of fiddlenecks, and you want to let your wildflowers go to seed. That's what's tricky, but you just do the best you can.
Yeah, exactly. I have the same sort of ethic about leaving the wildflowers until they've set their seed. And so, yeah, the weed whacking gets done in the areas where the wildflowers are not dominant.
Yeah, exactly. And again, guys, none of it's perfect.
I have a question about the weed whacking. Are you talking about getting whacking while the grass is still green? Or
Correct.
do you wait
Yeah.
until it's...
Yeah, before the seeds have hardened up and before the seed heads have matured.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's going to be a negotiation at this house, because
Yeah.
some of us believe it's easier to do it once it's all brown.
Well, and it is easier to do it once it's all brown.
Well,
But
you'll
these are
probably
just
do it-
areas where you really want to control those non-native grasses. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So I have one on topic and one that I thought was off topic, but it turns out it's on. I have a neighbor that moved in 3 years ago, and she has a field of lupins that are absolutely stunning. And the first 2 years, she cut them down before they set seed, and I didn't catch her. So I talked to her actually day before yesterday and explained that, she kept doing that she wasn't going to have them and she'd have nothing but nasty weeds. So she was very grateful and plans on waiting until the lupins die and set seed this year. For the dews, or it turns out it'll be a don't, I actually have a big manzanita that's dying. It's been dying for the last 3 years. And I was looking at it today and considering how I was going to take it out and what I was going to put in there. But I think now I'm going to leave it completely and maybe maybe try to get some grapevines or something.
Oh, God, you've given my life a reason to exist.
Yeah. So it was good. I've got several I've left on the property, but that one I was going to take out. But because they do look nice when they're dead too. They are beautiful.
Yes, and
so
they have all kinds of invertebrate life and birds and all kind of things that they benefit.
Okay.
Awesome, thanks. We should probably finish up unless someone has something they just absolutely are dying to share.
Well, I do have something else, and I'm a little hesitant to bring it up.
Uh-oh.
If anybody wants it. because it's not a native. I dug a huge rosemary out today.
Mm-mm.
So I don't know if anybody wants it for a pot.
You can
or something
contact
like
him
that.
offline, off Zoom. That's Preston Sullivan.
I'll put my phone number in again.
Or chat with him right now in the chat. We don't rehome rosemary over here. Thanks, Preston. All right, I'd like to end again. As we talk about these things, right? There's so many things that we can't control in our yards, but there are things that we can. We can control what we know about our yards, how much we understand the plants in them, whether we treat them with respect and understanding, or whether we don't really quite maybe even know to do that yet. So I would like the serenity to continue to accept the things that I can't change in the garden, and the bucks have been just tearing down my woody growth, as they do every year, but it breaks my heart every time. But I can't change it. I cage what I can. I encourage to cage the things we can in the garden is what I call it. That was a joke. And wisdom to know the difference. Let's see if I can get out of this and see everybody. I can't. My computer totally freaked out through all this, but I hope that there weren't tech things that I was unaware of. Like, did it seem like you were seeing things when I was seeing them? Or was there a delay?
There was a bit of a delay, but we knew it was coming.
I'm sorry about that, you guys. I'll try to figure that out before next time, but I have a feeling it's probably because Zoom is so busy. But I'm very grateful you were here. Our next meeting is the last Monday in January, and that's the meeting where we will be talking about the future of our joined groups and what that might be able to look like. And thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you for all the work you did.
It was a great pleasure.
Thanks so much, Leslie.
Thank you. I wish you were in person
Yeah.
so I could see your faces and we could all chat a little bit. But that will happen. Oh, and go visit the garden. It's looking so pretty. The plants are going crazy. Okay, guys, I'm going to end the meeting now.
Okay.
I don't think
Thank
I
your hard work.
I don't
Thank you,
think I can
Leslie.
end it. So
Wonderful.
bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.